Welcome to Morning Coffee and Mimosas. I'm Christina.
And I'm Joe.
We are a father-daughter duo. We come here Sunday mornings, but you can come here anytime you please. We banter about life, about business, and we do it over coffee and mimosas. Top of the morning, Dad.
Oh, a little British accent, huh?
That wasn't really British. I don't know what that was.
I don't know what that was either.
Top of the morning.
Good morning.
Is that British?
I don't know. I just said it. You said it. I don't know.
Okay, well.
Top of the morning.
How are you, Dad?
Good. And because I'm not a sports fan, I don't know what that means. Does that mean is top of the morning early?
Why would that be late? Why would that be a sports reference?
Because I'm going to embarrass myself now because like in baseball, I never knew what part of the inning is top of the sixth or bottom of the seventh. I never know.
Yeah, but is top of the morning a sports reference? I think it's just saying it's early in the morning.
I don't know. How do we get on these stupid things?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't know. Why don't I just stick to good morning, Dad?
Good morning. That's what you should have done. I don't know where this top of the morning came from.
I don't know. I'm trying to,
We don't talk like that here.
What did we say in the last thing? Talk how you speak?
Yeah, exactly. And you don't speak like that.
Top of the morning.
Yeah.
No. Sorry. I've had a little bit too much mimosa this morning.
Evidently.
Bottom of the mimosa, top of the morning.
and I've had too much caffeine, so I'm jumpy.
Okay. Anyway, hey, while we're being silly here, and in the spirit of authenticity, I thought we should share with our listeners. So our last 3 episodes, episode 25, 26, and 27, was a series on communication.
Very good.
I didn't even say anything yet.
No, that you counted correctly.
Oh, yes. Well,
yes.
So that was a series on communication, and I thought it was kind of funny because in the spirit of transparency and authenticity, we actually had a little communication faux pas.
Communication breakdown.
We had a little miscommunication in our planning of the episodes, in our editing and posting. And I thought it was really funny, kind of ironic, because we miscommunicated as we were sharing our series of communication. So,
correct.
Listeners, you're never done learning.
And we are never done messing up.
Yeah. And what was the big lesson that we learned there, Dad?
Well, so in the recording, we leave and Brad is the fantastic editor.
Yes,
so
thank you, Brad.
He does our editing. Thank you, Brad.
He doesn't really like accolades, but thank you, Brad.
Yes. So he leaves purposely a little gap in the beginning for any kind of movement or, whatever. It's just like leaving some space, just like you would leave space and then trim up later.
Yep.
And so he did all the editing, and then I asked you if I could download the episode and post it. And you said, yes, but Brad didn't take the gap out. So what you were saying was for me to take the gap out and then everything was set. I interpreted that as it's all set.
And I mean, the listeners are probably listening to your explanation and they know I'm right in the situation, right? But neither here nor there.
Neither here nor there.
The point is, I could have said something incorrectly. You could have heard something incorrectly. And
Correct.
if we had exercised the practice of the feedback loop, in you saying, so Christina, what you need me to do is...
Right. Well, if this all would have been corrected, and this is what's so important about being clear. You were probably very clear,
I was
but
probably not very clear.
Well, whatever, but I misinterpreted. So if you had said to me, so Dad, what are you going to do with the episode? And I would have then said, upload it to...
Pull it off and upload it.
Right.
And I would have said no.
No, I didn't say that. You would have said, no, please remove that little gap.
I would have said, remove the gap and then post it. So listeners, apologies. You had a little gap in the beginning of the episode that may have really put a damper on your listening experience.
I don't think anybody noticed it. But.
No, now they do. Now they notice. But
that's right.
Anyway, little miscommunication that we could have easily corrected if we had practiced the feedback loop and confirmed what had to happen specifically next.
Correct. Correct. And we're going to talk about that in the future in our delegation episode. We didn't tell you about yet, but that's in the future. But that one little thing, just asking the person, whoever you're talking to, so tell me what I said, like, you know what you, and not just letting them nod their heads, but actually repeat it, solves a lot of problems. Similar to reading, like we talked about in another episode, about reading the email back, you know, so that works. So anyway.
What you mean by reading the email back is checking your work.
Checking your work before you
hit send. Yes. So anyway, as we are wrapping up the conversation of communication, I also thought I would share a little listener feedback that we received
Love
from
listener feedback.
Our listener Bart in Minnesota. So it's pretty cool that we are touching areas outside of the tri-state area. Very exciting. But and listeners, if you guys have feedback, if you're listening to an episode, something resonates, or you have an idea that would enhance the topic, please send it in. Let us know. We always appreciate that. And then we can share all that good advice with the rest of our listeners. Right. So Bart in Minnesota, on the topic of written communication, had a really good point that I think helps to, really kind of put an exclamation point on how to effectively, in written communication, get your point across. And he shared that one of the things that he practices and has been very effective is starting with the call to action. So what does that mean? When you start your email, instead of providing information and then, even if you put it in bold or whatever, the ask, start with what the person has to do. So, hi, Joe. As you read through this email, I'm going to need you to
remove the gap.
Hi, Joe.
Sorry.
You threw me off there. Hi, Joe. As you read through this email, I'm going to need you to approve the decision on X. Here's what you need to know, and then provide the context.
Right. So I know what I have to do, and then I have the context underneath it. But I'm going into it knowing
you're able to
what you want me to do.
You're able to intentionally read what comes next.
Right.
And I think it's important. A lot of times you have to figure out what you do from So anyway, thank you, Bart. And listeners, hopefully that helps you as well. It's something that I've been putting into practice, and I think it's really helpful. So start with the headline of here's what I need.
Excellent.
And then provide the information. So thank you, Bart. And anything else that, listeners, you think of, please let us know.
Absolutely. So what are we talking about today?
That's right. We have an episode today, don't we?
We do.
We're not just going to rehash the communication. Just recapping. We could talk about communication forever, it sounds like. Well,
today's episode is on listening, which is part of communication. Because if evidently I wasn't listening to you when...
You're never listening to me, Dad.
When you told me what to do and I didn't do it. But listening is just, it's so important. And, that's one of those, obviously it's important. But do we really... treat it with the importance that it deserves?
So today we are going to segue from communicating, because this is probably, if you look at more upstream from communication, there's listening. And you can't effectively communicate until you've actually practiced active listening. So we are going to talk about another topic that I believe everybody struggles with, and that is listening to understand. Maybe the distinction, right, is listening versus hearing. Correct.
Because I hear a million things, right? We all hear noises outside. We hear all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And I hear you talking, but do I remember or process or do anything positive with what you said?
You're right. So, Dad, you know how I like to look to Mrs. Merriam-Webster for
Mrs. Merriam.
Is it Mrs.? It's Miriam, a woman.
Oh boy.
Anyway, you know how I like to look to Ms. Merriam-Webster, or is it two last names? This is actually just a curiosity of mine.
I think it's
Merriam and
I
Webster.
Didn't really research
they
it,
collaborated.
But yes, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Well, sorry about that.
There is no Miriam, like in a first name.
So it's a collaboration, the Merriam and Webster families. I don't know.
Yeah.
Mr. Merriam and Mr. Webster. Anyway, this is really getting off the rails. But as I like to go to...
This is why I stopped listening.
I'm communicating terribly. Anyway, as I like to go to, let's just call it the dictionary.
It's important to get a dictionary definition as a baseline.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's think about, okay, so what does Merriam-Webster define this as, whoever they are? They describe hearing as the process, function, or power of perceiving sound, specifically the special sense by which noises and tones are received as stimuli.
Well, that's really technical.
It's very technical. But listening, however,
Yes.
and I mean probably just the process, function, or power of perceiving sound is hearing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then listening, on the other hand, means to pay attention to sound, to hear something with thoughtful attention, and to give consideration.
And give consideration. I like that.
Yes. So I think that's an important distinction as we're talking about listening. That's what you want to do. It's about receiving, understanding, evaluating the information, and then responding.
Very good. And you're being quiet for what?
I'm letting you digest this.
I digested it.
Okay. So how do we, as we think through that, kind of the difference between hearing and listening, and I think what certainly I've experienced at different times, right? You could be sitting in a meeting and you could be a part of a conversation and you can be hearing things, but are you absorbing them? And are you listening with the intent to receive the information? Are you listening with the intent to understand the information? Are you listening with the intent to evaluate it? And are you evaluating before you respond? So I think if you think about those kind of like critical 4 components of listening, then maybe we can give the listeners some tips and tricks of how in an everyday setting to try and put some of that into practice, because it's not easy, right?
No, it's not. And there are levels of that. So like the receiving, what is the situation in which I'm receiving this information? So for example, it's you and me. I can stop you and say, hold on a minute. Let me just get this down. Right?
Right, because that's a casual and we're familiar with each other.
Correct. But what if I'm in a meeting and there's 5 other people and you're the president of the company and I'm just Joe? Is it appropriate, or would I actually tell you to hold up a minute while I take notes, or am I just going to try to take quick notes and absorb? Right?
That's right.
So there are logistical issues in trying to listen carefully. So we have to make the best use of that.
So I think about that, and I think a lot of times we need hacks or, specific advice for how to do that. And I think one of the first things that you have to think about is, how do you best receive information? And I think what I find to be most important is eliminate any distraction. So it's making that eye contact. It's don't multitask, because I know personally, if I'm on the phone with somebody and I start multitasking, I'm hearing words coming out of people's mouths, right? And that's when you're on a call and you are hearing things, and we've all been there, right? And then all of a sudden your name is said.
I know.
And then you're like, oh, okay. Christina.
Well,
and then it's, I'm sorry, can you repeat that? Because you weren't listening. You were hearing, but you weren't listening.
And I want to just, I want to say something about that, because it's just funny. I was just thinking of school. Like when I was in school, it was called daydreaming, right? So I was just bored, the teacher's talking or something, and I would be daydreaming. Because in school, when I went to school, we didn't have the cell phones and a whole bunch of other stuff, right? Now, you're on a Zoom call or you're on a conference call, and on that device that you're doing your conference call on, email notifications are coming up, text messages are coming up, your phone is lighting up, then going down and lighting up, and so on. It is so incredibly easy to not listen, because we're responding to these stimuli constantly.
You're totally right. There are so many different things. So how do you make it easier for yourself? Remove the distractions.
Well, correct. Sometimes it's almost impossible, but you really do have to focus on the task at hand. And I think this gets to accomplishing anything that you really want to accomplish is focus. And for that period of time, whether it's 45 minutes, half hour, an hour, 10 minutes, whatever that call is, it's so critically important to try to focus on that. You have to force yourself.
And if you're somebody like me that is easily distracted,
Everybody is.
Everybody is, but some people more than others, remove the opportunities for distraction.
Yeah.
So I sometimes will turn notifications off.
Right.
On
or
my
turn
cell
your phone upside down and
I'll
put
turn
it on
my
silent,
phone upside
right.
down. I'll turn notifications off. I'll turn the email notifications off. So the less that you see popping up because sometimes an Outlook, an email will come through and you see a headline that's like, oh crap, or that's important. Or
Right.
It's like, try and put in perspective. You need to be active listening for whatever the length or duration of that meeting or time frame is.
Right. And I'm going to help you with that because I'm a techie, right? So here's the geek in me now. Did you know that on your phone, whether it's an iPhone or Android, and on your computer, whether it's a Mac or Windows, you can set it that if you have a meeting, that it turns off notifications for the duration of that meeting automatically.
In our show notes, might we provide the
for a
directions?
slight fee, I'll give the information out for that. But no, you're kidding.
Easy to say. I'm going to have to do a quick Google to figure out how to do that.
I just wanted to let you know that you don't have to, remember to do it ahead of time. That
and you don't have to do it all over the place. Like
no,
you can.
You can actually set that. Usually on an iPhone, Siri, you can set up stuff like that in that or in Android. So
I really appreciate, Dad, the way that you read through. If any of you, I don't know if any of you have read the manual on your car.
I have.
You're looking at a man that gets a new car and sits and reads that manual. The new phone, he reads the manual cover to cover.
So just so you know, we'll offer help. Yeah.
Good to know.
So that's on the receiving and so on. So basically force yourself, use technology, whatever, but you have to focus.
And I think, we've talked about this in previous episodes, but it's the same thing. Like when you're listening you meet somebody for the first time, shake hands. I mean, if you're still able to shake hands, the world is a little different right now, bump elbows, whatever.
Whatever you do.
But as you get somebody's name, we forget so often because of active listening. So focus rather than on what you're saying and what you want to say next. Focus on what the other person has said. Make eye contact.
Correct.
And repeat it back.
Huge. Yeah. It's actually not hard to remember names. We just don't do it because we're not paying attention.
Yeah.
And it all comes back to paying attention and focus to what we just said. So
that brings us to another point with active listening. How to do that is ask probing questions. So if somebody says something, make eye contact and then restate what they said, maybe summarize it and ask a follow-up question. Mm-hmm. It's sometimes a good, if you're taking notes, sometimes I find I'm jotting stuff down. I don't know shorthand. I don't know if that's something they still teach, but I'm jotting down points that I think are important so that I kind of have the essence of what's shared. And sometimes you might miss something, right? Somebody's talking a little bit faster than you can really absorb it. So ask a follow-up question. Hey, can you expand a little bit more on what you said about X? And usually that'll help you. If you might have missed something, it'll help you because they're going to provide a little bit more context and, allow you to then focus in on what they're sharing.
Right. And by the way, I'm going to go back to, I think I said it depends on the scenario. So let's say you're my boss and there are other people in the room. If you're giving information you want us to know or take action on, there really is nothing wrong with saying, Christina, I just want to make sure I have this right. You want me to, or you are saying, or what you'd like us to convey is. When you do that, it helps you, number one, obviously, because you can now write it down. But very often the other person, and whether your boss or a coworker or whoever that other person is, or a prospect or a client, may say, yes, that I did say that, but let me elaborate a little bit. Or what I really meant to say, yeah, I did say that, but what I really meant to say, it helps both parties.
Yeah.
And then you have that clear, as you put your second point, understanding. That understanding is a two-way street. It's me understanding what you wanted to say, or me understanding what I think you wanted to say. But by confirming it, you might clarify your own understanding of what you said, because we don't always say what we mean, and not because we're being misleading.
Right. Say what you mean what you say, but sometimes what somebody else hears is different than what you intended to say.
Or even you as my boss hear it back and say, well, yeah, that's true. I did say that.
I did say that, but that's not what I meant, really.
Yeah, or I'd like to make it a little bit,
more specific.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I'm going to, I love our topics because I'm going to loop back to confidence. Have the confidence to ask the clarifying questions, as you said. Have the confidence to restate what it is that you think you heard, and you will be elevated in other people's minds because they're like, wow.
Nobody is ever going to get upset with you for making sure that you have a firm understanding of what they actually wanted to share.
What they will be upset with is when you go off and run in the wrong direction.
Because you didn't hear what they were trying to say.
Correct.
Just because maybe you weren't listening, or maybe they weren't clearly communicating.
Correct. And you'll be the one asking the questions, and everyone else will be going, thank God. Thank God Joe did
good.
that.
So the other thing, too, when you go from listening to hearing, and I hear this often, I'll be on a call and somebody's sound is not good. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I scratch my head with how long it takes for somebody to address the fact that somebody's reception is broken up, somebody's too low to really hear. And I don't care if it's a customer, if it's it doesn't matter the relationship. If you cannot hear what somebody else is saying, you can't listen to it. So
why let it roll? Yeah, exactly. Why let it roll on because you're too embarrassed?
Quickly.
Yeah.
Like I sit on a call and I'm like, how has nobody mentioned the fact that this person's phone's cutting out?
Yeah.
So that's a fine time to interrupt. I mean, interrupting is no good, but it's a fine time to interrupt so that the person doesn't have to completely restate everything they just said. Interrupt with, hey, I'm sorry. It could be my line, but I'm not able to hear what Joe's saying. Is everybody else able to hear him okay? And then usually it's like, no, the reception's not good. And it's like, okay, well.
And everybody else agrees. They go, yeah, I couldn't really hear it. And they're thinking, well, then what'd you waste? Why didn't
this poor person's been like blabbing away and
right.
And nobody's heard it. So then it's resetting what I heard was up to, but address that right away. If there's poor reception, or if somebody's not coming through, or if they're not enunciating and it's muffled, address it just so that, hey, I'm having a hard time. Would you talk a little slower?
Mm-hmm. Again, have the confidence to get what you need to get out of the conversation.
Yeah. You said something interesting. You were throwing out some, and I don't know how fact-based they are, so I won't cite sources. But when we were talking about listening just before we started recording, you were talking a little bit about just the fact that, 93% of communication is not even the words.
Right.
So what is that? Like, can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I think that's big for listening.
Yeah. So communication is made up of not just the words. So communication is made up of the words that we speak, how we say what we're going to say, or how we say what we're saying, and what we look like when we're saying it. So think about this. A transcript is words. So I could say, Christina, transcript, Christina, comma, you did a great job. Okay? That's a compliment. You're happy with that, right?
I'll take it.
Okay. Now, what if I said, Christina, you did a great job. You feel better?
Yeah.
You feel better? What if I said, Christina, you did a great job?
Well, don't flatter me there.
Right. You see what I'm saying? How I say it, it's totally different. Now, if I'm now add the visual, and what if I said, I walked towards you, big smile, Christina, you did a great job. Awesome.
I feel good now. Yeah.
Right. What if I just was moving away from you, no eye contact, no smile, and said, Christina, you did a great job. Doesn't that sound more patronizing?
Hey, by the way, great job.
Isn't that a little patronizing? Like maybe somebody made me say that to you?
Yeah, I threw you some money
Right.
and then you...
Correct. So those percentages you talked about is how the listener, the meaning for what the person is speaking, how did the listener absorb the meaning? 7% of it is the words that were said. But I think it's something like 38% of the of the listener's understanding comes from how it was said.
So the tone.
Correct. And 55% comes from what I look like when I'm saying it.
Yeah. So are you smiling? Are you,
Right. Think of
and that only obviously applies if there is a visual element of it. Otherwise, it's, vocal and words. But
and it doesn't matter, because the obvious is that over 90% of how people understand what it is you're saying comes from how it's said, not the words that are said.
Yep.
If you learn nothing as a communicator, if you understand that, you can shape the way people hear and absorb what you say by emphasizing, by vocal quality, by everything else. And think about it. We've all seen fantastic speakers. Fantastic speakers, if they're on a stage, a performer, anybody, it's what they look like and it's how they say what they're saying. And that's how people, we understand more based on feeling. And that's why in every presentation skills, public speaking and so on, when they teach it, how do you want your audience to feel as a result of what you're doing? So think about that in a one-on-one conversation or as a manager to their direct report. In any way, if you want to impact and change the behavior of the people listening to you, it's your vocal quality and
your
how
expression.
You come across and your stuff that comes across.
Yeah, I love that.
It works for sales. It works for...
It's really important for listening too. So listen to the tone, listen for the,
yes.
Listen and watch for the, visual cues, because that's all a part of listening. Listening isn't just done with your ears. Listening is, technically, I might be getting it off. But listening isn't just done with your ears, right? Listening
is your eyes also.
Right. Listening is being done with your eyes. Listening is being done, with more than just words.
And
You're
your
listening
feelings.
for the feeling.
Correct. And your feelings. So if I hurt your feelings, you feel that, you're going to remember that. It doesn't matter what I said to hurt your feelings.
Right.
Because I could hurt your feelings telling you were great.
Right.
But it's like, well, he just told me I was great, but he didn't really look that. That wasn't really convincing.
Well, you get mixed signals that confuse you.
Yes. Yeah. So that's very, very important. And that's what fits into how a person, I think the fourth point you meant was responding. Responding,
yeah.
How that person or how you respond, you're responding to all those stimuli, not just the words.
Yeah, and I think what happens is sometimes those things happen out of order. You kind of have to keep that in order, and it has to be a loop of receiving, understanding, evaluating, and responding. Because what happens is somebody receives and then they respond. I think that's what happens most frequently, is it's a reception and a response.
Right.
Reception, response. And that's why active listening isn't happening. That's why miscommunication happens. So make sure that you're receiving the information, you're understanding it, confirming that you understand it first, evaluating it, and then responding.
Right.
So I think that's the crux of this. And then a couple of reminders, so that's kind of the essence of what we're communicating here on listening. And a couple reminders. So give your undivided attention. Don't multitask. Make sure that you're paying attention to all aspects of communication, receiving, understanding, evaluating, responding. And finally, make sure you have that feedback mechanism. So recite things back, summarize, paraphrase, make sure you understand, and pay attention to the visuals and listen with your eyes as well as your ears.
Right. And have the confidence to ask questions and to get clarity.
Yep.
So ask me a question so I can not answer it. Well, I have one for you.
What?
I got your Merriam-Webster answer.
Mrs. Merriam-Webster.
We knew this, but I wanted to get this. So it was George and Charles Merriam founded the company as G&C Merriam in Springfield, Massachusetts in 1843.
Who's Webster then?
Oh, that was in 1831 that they formed it. They bought, Noah Webster had an American dictionary of the English language. He passed away, and they bought the company from his estate.
Oh.
Therefore, it's Merriam-Webster.
Mrs. Merriam-Webster. That has to be one of my worst.
They're rolling over in their graves. So.
Oh, man.
Anyway, got the answer for you. And for you listeners, because I know that you probably will like, even though we're making fun of Christina, it's not a bad question.
I mean, it's kind of like a Snapple cap or something. It's useless information that nobody really neneeded to know. But
well, I'm filled with useless information, so I thought I'd get you your answer. So thank you. This was good.
Mrs. Merriam-Webster.
No, don't end with that.
I love it. Oh, gosh. All right, Dad. Well, thank you. Should we end there? What do you say?
We're going to end there. Yeah.
What do you say? Shut it down?
Let's shut it down. But
All right.
we don't shut it. We give our little advice at the end.
And before we close down, if you guys liked what you heard, again, give us some feedback. Send us a topic idea.
Share it.
Hit the subscribe button so that you keep getting updates when we post new episodes, and share with a friend.
And remember, some are subscribe, and I think Apple Podcasts is follow now. Some of the stuff is changing, but
you know. Do what you do.
Do what you have to do. Okay.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. Bye. We'll see you next week.
Wherever you are, whatever your story, thanks for spending time with us this morning. Now, go and make a difference in your world.
So, Dad, what are you going to do this week? Are you going to remove the gap in front of the recording before you post, or what?
I am definitely going to double check with you and ask you questions this time.
Do you hear the words that are coming out of my mouth? Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.